Much for having me. Really excited to be on the show today, and thanks to everybody that's listening in. Allow me to share my screen.
Yeah, hold on just a moment. There you go. Now you should be able to share your screen.
Perfect. And just give me a thumbs up when you can see the slide here.
All right.
Perfect. So yeah, thank you, Lou, again for having me in the introduction. My name's David Markley. I work on the business solutions team here at Algorand. And to just give a brief overview of what the team focuses on is really working with companies of all sizes, from startups, people that are innovating in the DeFi space, to large institutions and governments who are interested in researching things like central bank digital currency or the regulations around how we can fractionalize, unitize, and use blockchain to make atomic trades of things like asset-backed securities. And so that's the spectrum that we get to play in every single day, which is a lot of fun and allows us to wear a lot of different hats. Specifically with regards to Algorand, if you aren't familiar, Algorand is a new layer 1 blockchain built from the ground up. So it's not a fork of any other of the protocol that is in existence today. It was conceived of by Silvio Micali. Silvio Micali is a MIT professor, Turing Award winner, really well known for his co-invention of zero knowledge proofs, and has really been at the heart of cryptography for many years now. And Silvio got introduced to blockchain and really wanted to disrupt what was known as the blockchain trilemma, the concept that you couldn't have a platform that was fast, had large or high transaction throughput, was secure, so retained all of the great benefits of blockchain that we love and we trust in cryptography, and also be fully decentralized. And so you can only have 2 out of the 3. And so Silvio and his team put mind to purpose, and the end of their several-year journey is the launch of the Algorand network. And Algorand went live, for those of you that are new to the protocol, went live in June of 2019. To hop into the protocol here and give you some background into what we have under the hood and what that enables from a user experience and from a business perspective, is what we call our consensus mechanism is pure proof of stake. Some of you might have heard of bonded proof of stake or delegated proof of stake or some of these other variations. And the reason why we call it pure proof of stake is that those other proof of stake implementations have some trade-offs. As an example, in bonded, your node validators, your runners, they have to post collateral in order to validate transactions, introducing a layer of centralization where only people who can post the associated amount of capital are able to validate. On Algorand, we don't make those trade-offs, so we enable anyone and everyone to actually validate and participate in consensus. And we can talk much more about that if there's interest to go into the technical weeds. But what that ultimately manifests itself in terms of benefits to the users, is that you get real security, you get real scalability without having to sacrifice that decentralization. And we believe that this foundation is the right foundation for all businesses to build on top of, because you won't ever run into a situation where you're making a trade-off between what users are able to participate in my network and what capabilities. Can I only process transactions at a certain speed, because if not, I have to reduce the openness of the platform. So I hope that makes sense. Some other core benefits of the protocol is that it's extremely energy efficient. So as we all know, proof of work, the mining, the amount of effort that goes into solving each mathematical problem is proportional to how many people are in the network. And so that energy consumption only continues to grow as more participants join. Algorand, we've actually decoupled that. Our mining, if you wanted to make the comparison, there is no mining in Algorand, but how we come to a block, how we come to consensus is extremely energy efficient. Everyone can run it. As an example, we've run it on Raspberry Pis, which are very lightweight platforms, very lightweight computational devices. And so it can be run on a whole host of different types of infrastructures. You don't need a dedicated data center in order to participate in the network. And then how that manifests itself is that every transaction coming to consensus is very cost efficient. So for those of you that have been following Ethereum and the gas prices and the rise of that cost, it's really put a lot of the smaller microtransaction focused companies and businesses really in a hard place. On Algorand, as you can see here on the screen, the average cost since our network inception has been $0.0003 US dollars per transaction. And so between the openness of the platform, the scalability of the platform, the energy efficiency of the platform, that's really what has set the foundation for the growth that we've seen to date. And to talk a little bit more about Algorand by the numbers and the last 18 months or so of growth, the business solutions team, the team that I'm a part of, we've helped over 400 companies, up over 500 now, have worked and integrated the Algorand technology into their stack. That's inclusive of the global exchanges that people are familiar with, asset issuers like stablecoins such as USDC, USDT. We've got a number of others which we'll talk about here in just a moment. And then also the supporting infrastructure around that. So whether it's custodians, wallet providers, other hardware technology solutions, identity providers, there's a big ecosystem that we're really proud of and that we're really excited to continue to add and grow and build collectively. In terms of usage, a lot of people like to focus in on the transaction volume. A lot of people like to focus in on the number of users. We have steadily had over 500,000 transactions per day. To put that in context, Ethereum is a little over 1 million transactions today currently. And so, we feel pretty good that within the first 12 months or so of our ecosystem being live, we're half the volume of Ethereum. And by the end of this year, we're closing in on being able to scale that pretty rapidly. And so I hope that
David, do you give any context in terms of where those 500,000 transactions are?
Sure. Yeah, so there's two large consumer-facing applications right now that you'll see if you go to any public block explorer. You'll most likely see one of their transactions in the blocks. The first one is Props. So Props you can think of as a loyalty point platform that enables any application to offer a loyalty point like service and platform for their app. So if you wanted to reward your users for filling out a survey, you can reward them in Props, and Props are being listed and integrated on many of the exchanges that we're connected to. And so now your rewards program actually has some real world value just outside of your own application. So that's one major driver of transactions and one use case that a great partner of ours that we're extremely proud of. And then the other one that you'll most likely see is a company called Planetwatch. They're a very interesting use case as well. They connect IoT devices. And the way that they think about these devices is that they're actually their own atomic entity. And so this IoT device, it records data. If you're interested in access to that data, you basically pay the IoT device. Those payments are done in their native token called the Planet. And so the IoT device is generating its own revenue, helping perpetuate, funding itself basically to continue to collect data. And then as being an owner of that device, you're entitled to a portion of the revenue that sensor captures. And they sell that data to a number of institutions, governments, research centers, universities. And so it's a super interesting two-sided marketplace, and anybody can become a sensor owner and participate and then start earning Planet tokens on the Algorand platform. In addition to those, you'll also see all of the stablecoins that I'm sure Lou and I will talk about here in a second. One of the ones that we're pretty excited about is a company called Meld. They just issued a gold-backed stablecoin listed in Australia within the first week of listing. They've done about over $1 million or so of traded volume. So pretty excited to see that start to ramp and take hold in what historically has been a very paper-heavy process in holding and storing physical gold bars. So it's exciting to see them bring the stablecoin to the forefront and part of their innovation.
Terrific. So that's the overview to start.
Yeah. I've got some additional slides depending on what we want to dig into, but I think that's probably a good primer. And so I'll pause there, Lou, and see if you've got any other questions for me.
Sure. So, well, let's start digging into the into kind of DeFi and stable coins and what what Algorand is doing to kind of embrace that, rapidly growing ecosystem.
Sure. Yeah, so one of the things that I didn't outline on the community slide and the ecosystem that we're building, Algorand has three primary areas that we're seeing a lot of growth in over the last 18 months or so. The first, as Lou mentioned, is DeFi. The second being more traditional financial institutions, and then the third being that CBDC government regulated, central bank digital currency that we've been investigating and working on as well. And we really view the future of our ecosystem being the combination of those three. And so to start with DeFi and what we're working on, obviously, if you think about an economy, you need a stable medium of exchange. And this is where stablecoins come in. And it's a large part of the reason why they've found product market fit in the blockchain arena. It is the first step. We don't believe that it's the end all be all to just have a network of stablecoins. We view that as a way of getting into future investments. And so whether it's gold or whether it's tokenized securities or whether it's asset-backed securities rather that are issued on the platform, we view the stablecoin as that gateway, that fiat on and off-ramp that everyone talks about to be able to get into those investments.
And when you work with somebody, you mentioned USDC, you mentioned USDT. When you work with them, what specifically does Algorand do to help them?
Yeah. So on the business solutions team, we obviously talk to them about why blockchain. For USDC, that's a little bit of an easier conversation. But once we help educate, or illuminate the areas that blockchain can really be beneficial, we've got a solution architecture team as well. And this is a key differentiating factor for Algorand. If you've tried to build something on Ethereum, historically, the best place for you to get some advice might have been a Reddit thread or some Discord that the community threw together. Algorand has people that are on staff that can help you think through your architecture, to think through how to integrate with your legacy systems. And so that's a service that we offer to our partners like USDC. They have a very strong technical team, so they didn't require a whole lot of our time, but it's been a huge value add for the many other companies that we work with.
And what about interchain? Are you interacting with any other blockchains yet, or is that on the roadmap?
Yeah. So we've got a number of collaborations. One that we're particularly invested in right now is working with Blockstack. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but they have a layer 2 smart contract language called Clarity. It's very aligned to the way that we are envisioning solving more general purpose smart contracts. And so our collaboration is to have this one language called Clarity that can be compiled and create smart contracts on either platform. So you can create your smart contract, have it run on Blockstack, or you can create the same smart contract, have it compiled and run on Algorand. So that's one example of some cross-chain collaboration. We're also creating a technology, what we call internally compact certificates, but what you can think of as just a token bridge. And in the future, over the course of 2021, we will really start to see connectivity to the primary public chains, and then we're also working on some integrations with private chains as well. We view the public network, things that like Algorand is running, to be the connective tissue that will hopefully form the Internet of blockchains, as it's been so called.
And let me remind the audience, I'll be asking David questions for about another 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So if you have a question, put it in the chat function. And if we call you up and take your question, we will open up your mic and your video so you can ask the question yourself, come up on stage and interact with David directly. And we'll be doing that in about 10 minutes. David, how do you think about the Algorand community? Obviously that's I think a massive strength and differentiator for Ethereum. They obviously have a large, growing, passionate community. How do you think about the Algorand community, and how is that growing?
Yeah, great question. At the heart of the community and at the heart of everything that both the Algorand Inc. and the Algorand Foundation, and I'll define both of those entities in just a second, but at the heart of all of the activity that we're doing is really about educating people how to leverage Algorand. And that doesn't necessarily mean how to build smart contracts on Algorand. For instance, it could be how to use Algorand's mobile wallet in order to transact with assets or interface with assets on Algorand's platform. It could be finding other development studios to assist you with building your application. It could be finding counterparties in the capital markets ecosystem that we've curated to trade your particular asset. And so when we think about the community at large, it's really about education and it's really about enablement. And that's the activities that we're really focused on, whether it's hosting hackathons, meetups, the solution architecture team with a little more hands-on and directed kind of approach. But that's really what we're working on. And we believe that, through our partners, that's going to be the fastest way for us to scale adoption and usage. And the last thing I'll pitch on that, Lou, is a great example is how Circle has made available via their business APIs the ability to select Algorand or Ethereum as your transaction platform of choice. And so again, not necessarily having to write a smart contract, but just connect to Circle's platform and then be able to use Algorand. So those are the ways and the activities that we're doing to help grow the ecosystem in the community.
That makes a lot of sense. What has Algorand learned in terms of being live now? You said, for about, I guess, a year and a half.
Ooh,
how has it evolved?
Well, the learnings have been numerous and very deep, to say the least. How has it evolved? So when we initially started, we set out to solve these very hard technical challenges, and it was very oriented on the incentive model, creating the right incentives in the ecosystem, governance, really the blocking and tackling that every one of these networks has to put in place. And I mentioned in the last response that I would define Algorand Inc. and Algorand Foundation. And so for the audience's benefit, Algorand Inc. is the company that I work for. We have been chartered to build the core consensus mechanism, to build the core technology that underpins the Algorand network. And so that's what our team is really focused on, that, and then enabling others to build on top of it and extend the platform. The Algorand Foundation is the steward of the native asset of the network, which is the algo. So the algo is what you use to pay for transactions. It's what you use in order to gain access to more state and store more assets on the network. And so they're really set up as technical oversight and governance of the economic engine that we've built. So that's how the two play in tandem. And what we've learned that Dutch auctions can be wildly successful in finding price discovery and bringing assets to market, so much so that it's actually a standard playbook that we've developed, not only for when we brought the algo into existence, but for helping other people achieve price discovery. As an example, I'm sure, or maybe some of you have read about the Republic of the Marshall Islands and their interest in issuing what they're calling the SOV, which is short for their sovereign currency, on Algorand's platform. One of the things that we're helping them with is helping find price discovery of a newly issued currency that no one has ever really used before. How do we determine what the trading value is? How do we determine what the price of it should be when compared to the US dollar, traded against the US dollar, as an example? So those are the types of things that we've learned, and those are the types of things that we're looking to grow and build on top of.
Terrific. And when you mentioned the Marshall Islands, obviously that's CBDC, central bank digital currency. Can you talk about your work with other central bank digital currencies?
Yeah, sure. It's a little funny because the Marshall Islands doesn't technically have a central bank. So to call it a CBDC is a little bit of an interesting classification, but independent of how we want to put a label on it, it carries all the same characteristics, right? It's being backed by a central authority, by a government, and then there are a host of learnings that are packaged around that. So how do you manage identity?
And just to back up, because it's actually a super interesting point, is there any difference between a CBDC that's actually backed by a central bank and one that's backed by a government like the Marshall Islands that doesn't have a central bank? I mean, not to get too arcane, but right?
No,
if
it's
nothing's
actually
backing the currency of the central bank.
It's a super interesting question, and I think it's a large part of the reason why the Marshall Islands is very interested in pursuing this effort. I think the primary difference is that if it is being issued from a central bank, there's the implication that central banking and a two-tier financial system is actually in place. And the blockchain in many cases isn't just an evolution of that system. It can be a recreation of that system, a re-envisioned way of facilitating what has traditionally been in place. And so for them, it's really about how do we ensure that we can have a successful migration without undoing everything that we've worked on over the last 100x years that we've had a central banking infrastructure in place. For people that don't, for developing countries and nations that don't already have that two-tier financial system, this is actually an opportunity for them to leapfrog and gain many of the benefits that the financial system provides without having to stand up all of the infrastructure. I think a great parallel, if you want to think about it in these terms, is when you think about the US and our waste management infrastructure. If you were to go anywhere and say, hey, we should have central plumbing that's run to every single home, the simple infrastructure cost associated with building that is too astronomical. There's many people, many countries just can't even approach the problem with the price tag that high. And so how do we rethink the problem? How do we approach it in a different format, in a different light? And I think blockchain is that new plumbing that can help really connect these emerging markets with their consumers in a more efficient way.
Okay, terrific. That sounds very exciting. Now we're going to go to questions from the audience, and our first question will be from Ganesh. Hey, Ganesh.
Hello, hi, David. So I'm a researcher in stablecoins at Warwick Business School, and so to David, so the Algorand platform is very interesting and obviously offers this proof of stake, which is a very sort of like big improvement over the proof of work systems. So I was just curious, in terms of transaction costs, is there a clear difference in kind of transaction costs, say per unit of trading on Algorand versus say Ethereum blockchain? And so do you see that there is a reduction in kind of sort of miners like wasted resources as a result of proof of stake?
Absolutely. So we're going to have to go down the rabbit hole. So I'll do my best to give you the short answer, and then we can unpack it a little bit. So apples to apples comparison, the amount of compute, the amount of energy expended to process a transaction is significantly, exponentially, several orders of magnitude less on Algorand than when compared to Ethereum. Now, why is that? Multiple reasons. One, the smart contract, as they have been, as they are known in the Ethereum world, is actually its own code, its own set of logic that needs to be compiled, executed, and run, and then propagated and run simultaneously across every other node in the network for a crude comparison. On Algorand, what we've done is, as opposed to having each person create their own smart contract, we've baked a lot of those capabilities into standard implementations that are built into layer one. So instead of having a layer two smart contract that you have to run and then everybody else has to run in order to have the most up-to-date state, the consensus itself, much like the way that it propagates algo balances, which is the native currency, it can also cover stable coins or any other asset. And so if you want to think about it in terms of a database model, Ethereum is several different databases and each one of them represents a different asset. Algorand is a single database where each asset is just a new column and all of the addresses are in the rows, if that makes sense. And so when we're doing that computation, it's very easy because it's already on, it's a standard. We don't have any additional logic to validate. It's already propagated. And so balance updates are very simple, much easier for us to change. And then the second part, so that's on the computation of the smart contract itself. The second part is on how we come to consensus. And so proof of work, as you know, is running this computational problem. On Algorand, we're actually just generating proofs, and we do that locally. And then we use some statistics and some verifiable random functions, which Silvio has helped pioneer as well, to ensure that that's very efficient. And so on both fronts, whether it's the execution of the smart contract or how we come to consensus, on both fronts, we are less resource intensive than the Ethereum protocol is.
Okay. Yeah. So one point, and you talked about the algorithms and kind of in terms of randomizing the miner that gets to validate the block. So is there potential for a potential miner to make up a lot of addresses to kind of increase their chance of being able to validate the block? Like, do you have safeguards against those kinds of activities?
Yeah, we do. And so the way that stake is accounted for is based on how many algos you hold. And so you can think of every algo in the system as a lottery ticket. And so it's actually disaggregated from addresses. And so someone could create 1 million addresses, but if they only have one algo between those million, they still only have one shot. And so the other attack in the scenario would be a 51% attack, where you buy as many algos as you possibly can, you hoard them all, and now you're the only person that's proposing and validating blocks. And our economic policy, the way that we're introducing supply into the market, is such that it effectively won't happen. We won't introduce more supply such that 51% will be controlled. And that's detailed. The Algorand Foundation publishes how the monetary supply is being governed, how it's being issued, how it's being introduced. So that's our safeguard against those two types of attacks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Ganesh. We've got our next question from Richard. So, Richard? Should unmute your microphone if you're muted.
Okay, the camera's not unmuting for some reason. Sorry about that. I don't know why. I'll tell you, David, this is fantastic. I don't know about Algorand, but I do now. Water, drinking from the fire hydrant, that's what's going on here for me. But I'm curious because I'm working with another company where we're doing some enterprise work, and the actual storage location is going to be, let's call it Hyperledger Fabric, okay? And we're doing a layer 2 on here as a middleware, which is able to do smart contracts and a lot of the dynamic functionality instead of using Golang or Java to put the contracts together. So it's a drag and drop almost. Simple. If you're able to navigate with an Excel spreadsheet, you can create these smart contracts. And then, of course, you bolt on a user interface on the top of it. I'm just curious, Algorand, I'm getting the feeling could be that middle layer. And so can I create, I heard some information from the last guest that, talking about, you were talking about how it's embedded into the on-chain, actually, the smart contract structure.
Right.
I guess you're using Clarity, but maybe help me out. Can you do drag and drop and dynamic smart contract creation without getting into the Java and Golang? And would you be that middleware potential replacement?
Yeah. So tons to unpack there, Richard.
Okay.
The short answer is I'd be happy to pick up the conversation with you in another medium. So if you want to reach out to me, I'd be more than happy to talk through it. To try and address each one of your points there, we have certainly worked on solutions where the storage medium is off-chain, whether it's IPFS, Hyperledger Besu, Corda, you pick your storage location, and you just have set interfaces with the public domain. So, yep, can do it. The second one being, do you have standards? So to give you an illustrative point that you were mentioning, I've worked with MBA, I've guest lectured at several MBA courses on blockchain, and I've had the entire class create their own asset, their own diploma certificate. It wasn't endorsed by the university, but they were able to create their own diploma certificate on chain, trade it with the other members in the class while we were there in the room. So in less than an hour, I had MBA students who, by and large, have never written a line of code in their life. They were able to create these assets and start transacting with them. And so, yes, we've got standards that come out of the box, provide a lot of functionality that you might be looking for. As far as the specifics, happy to follow up with you, independent of this conversation.
Great, thank you. That's a great answer. I appreciate that.
Okay, thanks, Richard. Our next question is from Zaremba. Zaremba? Need to unmute. There you go.
So I'm hoping am I right?
Yes.
You're good. Hello.
Hello, David. One thing is that it was interesting to see on your company's LinkedIn profile that you have a person with the same name as me. Putting that aside, I'm now asking from the point of view of data scientists in a fintech startup. And one thing that I found very interesting, also looking at some of the information on your website, on your website, you're saying that that often when you have permissioned rather than permissionless blockchain solution, then these are not that great because they're very bad for scalability and getting new users. And I'm particularly interested in that from the point of view of smart contracts, and a situation where you would indeed want to have a permissioned solution rather than permissionless. Could you address that?
Yeah. So I think a great mental model that many people have started to adopt that I think really resonates here is when you look at the evolution of the internet, right? It's not a perfect example, but I think it's one that makes the point where when the internet was first being ideated and it started, each entity, each company had their own intranet, right? Where each company had their own standards, they had their own communication protocols, they had their own representations, and now all of a sudden, my company wants to talk to Lou's company. Our assets aren't represented, our communication protocol isn't the same, how we share packets and messages isn't uniform, right? And so then we started developing standards like TCP/IP and other standards that enable us to have that streamlined communication, and that's what ultimately gave birth to the internet as we now know it today. We view the evolution of blockchain as a very similar progression where we've met with many companies that have private implementations. And don't get me wrong, there are certain applications where having something private, like your personal information, it should definitely not be posted on a public database. Maybe attestations or encrypted information, encrypted signatures of that information are maybe more appropriate in public domain. But I'm certainly not up here advocating for people to put their social security number or otherwise on a public blockchain, right? And so there certainly are good times to use private permission controlled instances, but by and large, we think that the public can be that fabric, those standards that we've started to create and adopt that will enable us to have more scalable interactions. And so it's not so much in terms of scalability with regards to transaction throughput, because if you put two nodes together in the same room connected with fiber, you can get really high throughput in terms of transaction volume, but it's scalable in terms of other entities that you can onboard and connect with. If every single person had a different asset and the way that they represented it was different, makes it much more difficult for us to trade those assets in a seamless way. And so that's what we mean when we're saying scalability, when we talk about public versus private.
I see. That makes a lot of sense. And I like the comparison to internet. I think that's probably a very good way of looking at it. So can you please say a little bit more about, because that's another thing that I thought was actually quite interesting on the website, that you're saying that most smart contracts platforms are both inefficient and insecure. In what sense they are, and in what sense Algorand is not?
Sure. So this goes back to defining those standards, right? And so as an example, when you want to set up this Zoom call, you don't have to go into your command line and start configuring web protocol, communication, facilitate the handshake manually. Behind the scenes, your operating system and all of the enabling network software is doing that for you, right? And that's because it's predicated on standards that we use. In Ethereum, you can think of it as kind of the 1.0, where you've got developers who are writing in a language that most people by and large aren't very familiar with, Solidity. And oh, by the way, you have to write 100% perfect code. And if there's a vulnerability, well, blockchains are immutable. So sorry, you're going to have to migrate your entire user base to a new contract. There's a lot of areas along that path that are just vulnerable to all sorts of different exploits, intentional or unintentional, right? And so that's what we're talking about broadly when we're saying the process, it has room for vulnerabilities. Certainly people have written secure smart contracts. That's not to say that they're all vulnerable, but the process in that raising the barrier to entry by having everyone have to write perfect code all the time is just a high bar. So at Algorand, learning from that and appreciating, those challenges on Ethereum, again, we've taken a lot of what we've seen out there as terms of use cases, whether it's fungible tokens, non-fungible tokens, security tokens, and we've baked all of those capabilities into layer 1. So now when you interface with Algorand, you send a transaction that says, hey, I want to create an asset. I want it to be fungible. I want it to carry this set of names, ticker symbol, etc. And I want to be able to have a allow list, deny list. I want to be able to freeze the asset in someone's custody so I can align with the SEC or the FCA's guidance. I want to have a revocation manager, or I don't want any of those things and shut them all off, and I want it to look like Bitcoin. And so those are the types of things that allow people like fresh MBA students in order to create assets within an hour and then transact them on our network.
I see. That sounds really cool. So basically, what you're saying is that this is more foolproof by having more like richer standards on the level 1.
Yeah, that's right.
Cool. Awesome. I think actually that answers all of my questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Zaremba. Our next question is going to come from Lori.
Hi, Lori.
Hi, David. How are you?
I'm great.
Thanks for taking my call. I was wondering if Algorand is active in Asia, and what do you think of China's CBDC?
So one, we are certainly active in Asia. Many of our founding team members either hail from Hong Kong or did their studies in Hong Kong. And so we've got a solid team that is based and contributes from the Asia continent. So we're very active. And then with regards to China CBDC, I think they're in a unique position because they appreciate that currencies happen to fall in a winner-take-all type of scenario, where the person who creates the standards, who defines the interface, who defines how it's going to be used and what that governance looks like, historically has been the one that gets to set the rules going forward. And so, by all accounts, what I've heard is that it's not if China will use a CBDC, it is when they will launch their CBDC. So I think they're fairly advanced in their thinking on the topic. In terms of global implications, unfortunately, I'm not an economist or a central banker, and so I can only muse. And I don't think my point of view would be very interesting, but they're definitely ahead from a technical perspective in what they've implemented and where they're at, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Okay, thanks, Lori. So, in the stablecoin world, I guess yesterday, we had 3 congressmen proposed something called the Stable Act. I don't know if you've had a chance, this is obviously fresh off the presses, but if you've had a chance to look at that and have any thoughts on that.
So I haven't been able to read it in its entirety. It is circulating internally at Algorand, and I know that the team is looking at it. On the whole, that we continue to have progressive conversations with our counterparts on every hill, not just the hill, so to speak. And we think it's positive. The one thing that we hear from the institutions that we talk with is that we understand the benefits, we understand the cost efficiencies, we understand the programmability of money going forward, and we believe that's the future, but we don't know how to account for it. We don't know what the regulators are going to say when it shows up on our balance sheet. We don't know how to hold it. We don't know what the implications of the key custody is if we do that on behalf of our customers. And so we need regulatory guidance before we can, jump into the pool with both feet. And so anytime that the dialogue is being had, we think it's a positive sign for the industry. We welcome regulation because we think it'll fast track a lot of the conversations that we're already having.
Makes a lot of sense. And just building on the last question as well, can you talk about, in terms of what you're seeing on a global basis, the differences potentially between geographies in Asia, Europe, US, Latin America, and where you're seeing, I guess, usage growing the fastest?
Yeah. I guess instead of classifying it by time zone or geographic position, I'd say it's more grouped by their existing financial infrastructure. again, going back to if you have a two-tiered financial system, if you have investment banks and commercial banks already established that are the interface for your central bank, they tend to be looking at blockchain as a way of increasing efficiency or potentially, making the existing system more efficient than the practices or the technology they currently have in place. For those that don't have that model, that tends to be where the conversation around retail CBDCs tend to be really interesting. And for those of you that haven't researched the differences between wholesale CBDC and retail CBDC, the short version is retail is where the central bank has a relationship directly with consumers. So, you could have theoretically an account at the central bank, and when it's time for them to do distribution or they want to print more money, it can go direct to your account from them, which is very different than the world we happen to live in with the two-tiered model, where they issue money to investment banks or commercial banks. Those commercial banks create loans, mortgages, et cetera, and issue those products into the mainstream. And so, on both sides, I'd say that's the delineation in the conversation, is if you've got the infrastructure, it's more of a advancement of how to make that infrastructure more efficient. Or on the other side, it's really a conversation of, hey, what if we could leapfrog that model altogether and go right to consumer? Both have their merits. Both are super interesting. I think retail will be more revolutionary, but it also is a little bit of a thicker problem because you have more counterparties because you're interfacing directly with all of the individuals as opposed to a known set of banks. So they both have their pros and they both have their challenges to overcome.
And that's, thanks for breaking that out for us. And while, I have seen some talk of retail and going direct, are there any countries, and maybe the Marshall Islands, is that you've actually seen who are going direct? I've heard of different countries talking about it, looking at it, but nobody, has said that. And, obviously one of the bigger issues of that is, they're cutting out the middleman today, which is the traditional commercial banks.
Yeah. So unfortunately, what I can say is there are people, there are countries, there are conversations that are being had where retail is the predominant design choice. Unfortunately, I can't disclose who those countries are, but there are people who are very advanced in the design process, in the rollout strategy for a retail CBDC.
And those are, and I totally appreciate if you can't name the countries, but would you describe them as larger, more sophisticated countries, or more smaller, or running the gamut?
Well, personally, anytime your GDP exceeds $1 billion, I guess I'm going to put you in the if further advanced. But I mean, if that's a good enough proxy, so I'd say both. I'd say on both ends of the spectrum. And then with regards to the CBDC itself and the challenges that they're looking at solving, the cost of cash, I mean, if you were to take a list of countries based on their cost of cash management and stack rank them, I think that would give you a pretty good insight into who's looking at retail and why. If you look at the Marshall Islands as an example, the way that they circulate cash between their island nations is they put it on boats and they ferry it around. So there are just specific challenges when it comes to movement of cash and movement of capital, and that's not a one-off. I mean, that happens in many different forms all over the world. So retail is certainly a very interesting discussion that's being had on many fronts.
Yeah, undoubtedly. Well, this has been great. We always finish Stablecoins Are Killing It with two questions, and the first is if we're talking again in a year. What do you think we'll be talking about? And it can be, more broad than just stablecoin, but what do you think we'll be talking about in a year with regards to the Algorand business that we're not really talking about today?
Well, first, I hope that the name of the podcast has a nice rev where it's not just stablecoins are killing it, but tokenized assets are killing it, right, on the whole. So I hope we get to a point where we're up leveling, because I think it's without a doubt that Bitcoin is here to stay. Stablecoins have found their product market fit, and now how do we, grow from that foundation that we've built? So I hope that's the first thing that's different in a year from now. And Lou, I'll let you and your marketing department determine whether or not that's the right course of action. But with regards to Algorand, the first 6 months of the protocol going live was really about laying the right distribution channels, about having the right partnerships so that when assets go live, they have areas where they can trade, they have counterparties, they have people that can offer lending and borrowing facilities. And we certainly have that in place. And then I think that's why you've seen a steady growth of new assets coming onto the platform, because they're appreciating that not only is it much more approachable, I don't have to be a master in some coding language that I've never even heard of, let alone write perfect code in it, in order to achieve my business objectives. And so over the last 12 months or so have been a steady increase of not only the assets, but the transactions on chain. And so if we project that a year from now, I think regulation becomes much more clear and defined, which paves the way for things like asset-backed securities to be completely fractionalized. And then maybe we can get to an even crazier place where things like balancer and DEXs are being used to facilitate what traditionally broker dealers have been facilitating. So I think that's an interesting future for us to talk about in 12 months.
Yeah, undoubtedly. Let's hope that all comes to pass. And then lastly, if somebody wants to get a better understanding of Algorand, start working with Algorand, what's the best way for them to go about that?
Yeah, so you can reach out to me. You can also visit our website. We've got a number of places where you can contact us. But my personal email is david.markley, Markley, @algorand.com. So if you get in touch with me, someone from my team or I will reach out and set up some time to talk.
Okay, terrific. Well, thanks again, David, for coming and talking on the show this week. I thought it was a terrific show. And thanks everybody who joined us live, and join us next Thursday for Stablecoins Are Killing It, episode number 24. We're actually going to be doing a deeper dive into the Stable Act. And so thanks everybody, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks so much, Lou.